So, in the last year, the health pandemic has, well, it's altered almost every part of our lives, from the way that we spend time with our friends and our family, to how we shop, study, and especially, of course, how we work.
And now, with more companies than ever transitioning to permanently remote or flexible working arrangements, how has that changed how we interact with our colleagues? Well, our next guest says that in this kind of environment, successful teamwork in business is more important than ever before.
Indeed, that's for sure. Andy Fieldhouse has spent 2.5 decades working with companies all over the world to help them create the right kind of company culture and practices for success. Now, he's got an Amazon bestseller to his name, and will be taking part in a couple of sessions at the LitFest this year to share his extraordinary expertise. Delighted he joins us in the studio now. Andy, thank you so much indeed for being with us.
It's a pleasure to be here, thank you.
Thank you.
Two and a half decades in the business, as they say as well. Is teamwork still dream work, or has it evolved over that time as well?
It's definitely evolved and evolving, especially with everything that's going on at the moment. And I think it's paradoxically getting a little bit harder. I think it's more and more necessary out in the world and in the workplace. And as much as we're blessed with better and better tools, technology, platforms and things that can actually enhance teamwork, I think as humans we're finding it harder. And one of the sad things about the coronavirus pandemic in terms of the impact on people is the mental health issues, isolation. Even though we can do all these wonderful things on Zoom and every other platform, it is actually becoming a little bit harder, so it is still very, very necessary. Yeah.
There's been a lot of debate about whether talent or teamwork is more important. I think it was Michael Jordan who famously said talent will help you win the game, but it's teamwork that's going to help you win the championship. What are your thoughts? Is it a combination of both or one or the other?
I think he also said there is no I in team, but there is an I in win.
And
this is an interesting thing, is it talent or is it teamwork? There's a ethnographer at Cambridge University called Mark Durand who wrote a book called There Is an I in Team, and so it's the debate, this perennial debate, is it more important to have talent? But he also studied the Cambridge boat crew, and he worked out that it's better to have your 8 best rather than your best 8. He looked at the stats of, is it the best 8 individual rowers to get in the boat, or is it actually the combination and the teamwork? And the answer was it was the team. The team is the one that has the best sum. Is better than the sum of its individual parts. So I think for me, obviously, I bang the drum for teamwork, and to borrow another phrase, the score takes care of itself if your teamwork is absolutely on point and your team is functioning really, really well. So that's where it begins.
Very comfortable with all these sporting references, people. I'm liking that at the moment, that's for sure.
He's spending too much time with you, Urquhart. It's rubbing off.
Let's talk about, because you referenced it, you alluded to the fact that, the last 12 months have been a little bit different for all of us in many ways.
Yeah.
Teamwork, for me, or traditionally, would suggest sitting around a table, banging out ideas, meet you in the conference room, let's talk about this, we'll have a breakout, etc. Remote working, how has that sort of impacted collaboration?
It's mixed, actually, and I've been studying it, and I've been sort of looking into this, and I think that it in some ways enhances, it increases the capacity and the ability to work, especially geographically, with anyone around the world. And some teams are sort of reporting that it's helping, and others are struggling. So I think I'd have to say that it's a sort of mixed response to that. You've got to get it right. You've got to adapt. And I think a lot of teams just, we were firefighting initially. The adrenaline was pumping, and everyone was like, "Oh, this new toy! Oh, it's all quite amusing." And that sort of drifted into a much longer period of lethargy, and it's getting hard.
Fatigue.
Zoom fatigue, isn't it? It's a real
Zoom
thing.
apathy, I think I heard. Yeah.
I actually found your research in this area really interesting. I was a little bit surprised, actually. I think your research found that 1/3 of people you'd surveyed said they felt in their workplace the pandemic had actually helped them to build trust, not break trust.
Yeah.
Why do you think that was?
Yeah, I was equally surprised by this. I was anticipating that all we were going to hear is doom and gloom, but 35% to say actually it's building trust. I haven't really quite got to the bottom of it, but I think part of the answer is I know some, and I think the teams that are doing well will report that kind of statistic. So some of the comments, some of the information around that was, some were saying that they are actually more productive and they're actually able to make decisions better. And I think it's a double-edged sword in that if you're on Zoom, you tend to get on and do the work, like, you know, other platforms are available. So you kind of cut out a lot of the fluff around communication and everything else, and so you're quite efficient. And if you're functioning in the first place, you can probably kind of keep on functioning and do quite well. And we know that part of trust is delivering on what you say you're going to do. So if you're actually meeting your targets and you're doing what you say, you're going to build trust. And then, you know.
No, sorry, I'm just sorry to jump in, but I want to jump in on a couple of your Zoom calls, because some of I've been on have gone on for hours.
Yes.
And we never really get to any sort of decision. And I just wonder whether we've sort of got this infrastructure of meeting etiquette per se that we've all grown up with. Do we have to sort of develop Zoom etiquette to avoid the apathy?
Yeah, definitely, I think so. And again, I think a lot of teams haven't, you know, it's no fault of their own. They're firefighting, and they haven't bothered to sort of, construct a new protocol and behaviour expectations. As an example, I have a friend here who works for a US hotel chain, and he can't come out on a Friday night because they're having business meetings at 7 p.m. here. And for him, he's like, so he's getting a bit upset, a bit disengaged. They're not even thinking about that. They haven't consciously designed the fact that he works here in this culture, in this part of the world, and it doesn't fit for him. Whereas if they said, okay, we understand that, do you mind doing a couple, because we kind of need to, but we respect, we'll let you off the next few, and kind of construct those kind of rules like that, which I think a lot of people aren't doing. And I always advocate that it's one of the first things you need to do. So yeah, new rules needs to be made.
Absolutely, because I bet they don't want to be doing a Zoom call on a Sunday morning, do they?
Exactly.
Andy, a few other things I want to ask you about, some secrets of success, tips for the work case. Can you stick around for us after the commercial break?
Sure.
Excellent. We're going to take a short break. We'll be right back with Andy Fieldhouse in just a moment. Don't go anywhere. Lots coming up. You're watching Dubai One. Welcome back. You are watching Dubai One's special coverage of the Emirates Airline Festival of Literature. We've been speaking this evening with Andy Fieldhouse. He is an expert in teamwork, been consulting all around the world for more than 2 decades. Andy, thank you very much for joining us. So, as we just mentioned, we've been talking about why teamwork is so important in the workplace today. And we were talking about the way that obviously work has shifted online in the last year. Now, when it comes to Teams meetings, Zoom calls, etc., I thought it was quite interesting that in a study Tom referred to earlier, around 60% of women said they found it difficult to be heard in these online meetings. A lot of men as well, about 40%, but clearly there's a bit of a divide between the sexes. How do we need to adjust to deal with something like that?
Yeah, I've been looking into this as well, and actually this was going on beforehand, this kind of concept, and I read a couple of phrases. One was man-terrupting in meetings, and bro-propriating was another one, where men take the lady's sort of idea and claim it as their own.
It's worse than mansplaining.
Yes, and actually it's got worse online. That statistic has actually increased, and I think it goes back to what we know about gender bias and discrimination and everything else that thankfully we're addressing. One of the things actually is goes to I think women's innate ability to be better in teams than men, and studies have proven that teams with majority women are better than majority men, although the stats, I have to say, do go the other way when it's fully women in a team. And I think that part of the thing is women are so much better at just tuning in and being much more empathetic and reading things a little bit better. And when you suddenly take away just that subtle hand movement that's kind of off camera, and then you put it onto a Teams or a Zoom window like that, you miss so much. And so men perhaps are more used to just dominating and saying things, and they can kind of get things done. And
I'm looking at you.
I ain't going to disagree with anything here.
You should talk to my wife. I'm sure she'll
going to nod. I'm going to nod like this.
Yes.
Just want to pick up on, you were mentioning about Zoom etiquette a little earlier on, and obviously our lives have changed. How many times we're going to say that during this show? The way we go about our lives has changed as well. Used to be work-life balance. Now all of a sudden it's work-life-school balance as well. Homeschooling is going alongside remote and home working as well.
Yep.
Is that something that we're going to have to factor in moving forward, taking into account the fact that you're sharing your workspace with a learning space now as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Those teams that choose to do so, but I think everyone's so much more forgiving. It doesn't matter so much. I mean, we all saw that BBC reporter with his child coming in, and it was,
Yes.
it went viral, and everyone thought it was hilarious. And actually, we're all humans. We've got families. It's not like our parents' generation when it was very, very separate. So I think I don't know of any evidence that I've come across of any companies sort of, not being forgiving and understanding about family life and the challenges of having kids in the background, and allowing that to take place. The interesting thing is what's going to happen next. In terms of going back to the workplace. And my studies are showing that 25% of companies were always or often online before COVID. Now it's 95%.
What?
Wow.
95% of companies are often or always online. And what will they do if it goes back to normal? 65% are saying that they will keep working online often or always.
Yeah.
So we're going from 25 to 65%, so it's going to be a factor going
I mean, if
forward.
you look at companies like Facebook, I think they've told their employees they can choose to work permanently from home if they so choose. What do you think will happen? Will we see more of a vaccine rollout here, that it is safer? Obviously, we still need to take precautions. How will that change teamwork in the workplace? Do you think we're going to be permanently looking at a hybrid blended model? And what does that mean? You mentioned some of the etiquette tips earlier, whether we limit meetings to 15 minutes, whether it's only a 3-page presentation.
Yeah.
What does that mean for how we work today?
Yeah, I definitely think there'll be a hybrid, and rightly so. And I think in terms of engaging your employees, having more flexibility, allowing the maturity of working from different places at different times, all of that will happen. Saves money. Who needs a great big office when people are working out by being forced to do this that you can. So it'll happen. I think the sensible teams are the ones that will consciously and intentionally do something to address the expectations. Going back to my friend on the Friday night, having those conversations. What's okay? What's not okay? Should your camera be on or off? Is it okay to have it turned off for certain things? Should you put a jacket on to go on camera? All these sort of things will need to be designed and created. And if you don't, you're just going to leave it to chance, and there'll be misunderstanding, confusion potentially. How much should I be in the office? When should I be in the office? All these kind of things need to be consciously designed if you're going to make it work.
You're being very empathetic, Andy, with your answer there. I wanted to ask you a question about that. I appreciate that Mimi Nicklin is obviously appearing at the Lit Fest this week. She's done a lot of work in this field as well, empathy in the workplace. Have we become more empathetic as employers and employees, or have we been forced to become more empathetic?
That's a good question. Have we become more empathetic? I think so. I think we're understanding a lot more about the science behind empathy. Mimi will tell you more about that, I'm sure, if you want to talk to her. But I think we're still missing a trick a little bit. We are learning more. We're educating people more. I mean, it's why I wrote my book, because I was thinking about my children who are 4 and 6 now. But when they're 20 and they're going to go out into the workforce, who's training them on empathy and teamwork skills and things like this? And you don't. You get taught geography and history and science, and you get to the workplace and no one tells you what to do. So my intention was to say, guys, this is how to do it. If you're going to work in teams, this is how to get teamwork right, part of which is empathy. And I think that's still needed, and there are still plenty of people who struggle with empathy, especially leaders, sadly, that are very focused on task, very focused on the share price and the bottom line, and are less focused on the human factor of business.
I read an interesting editorial from a headmaster earlier this year, and he said, parents, don't worry, we will teach your kids how to read and write. There's not many 18-year-olds who leave school who don't have those skills. What we need you to focus on right now is teaching your kids to be good people, to be nice people, to be empathetic.
And pick up their towels.
Absolutely. Towels and Lego. Have you ever stood on that stuff? What would be, I guess, your 3 top tips for the workplace? A lot of information here. If you were going to really specify something that you can create real change today for leaders.
Well, I think 3 top tips. I think number 1 is be your own advocate. It's terrible when you work in a team that you struggle with, you feel alone, you feel isolated, you don't feel connected, you don't know where you're going. I'd say that's partly your fault. For anyone in the team, be your own advocate. Don't accept feeling that way. You don't have to. I think a lot of people just make the mistake of assuming that working in the corporate world means it's going to be political, it's going to be difficult, you're going to have bad bosses, you're going to have all this stuff. And that's just the way it is. It doesn't have to be that way. So number one, be your own advocate and do something about it. Number two, as a team, consciously work on your team. You work in your team 99% of the time. You just need a little bit of time to actually sit back and consciously become aware of who you are and where you are as a team, and so you can do something about changing it. Seek advice, read books. There's plenty of stuff out there now that can help you with your teamwork. And the third one is it must become habit. We know that you need the right rituals, rhythms and routines where you can reinforce relationships, increase positive interactions with the team, build trust, but it takes effort, it takes conscious effort, and just having those daily, weekly, monthly, annual kind of opportunities for that to happen, not just the work you do, but actually working on your team.
And it's great to have you at the LitFest this year. Congratulations again on your Amazon bestseller. What's in the pipeline? What's 2021 got in store for you in terms of new books, new productions, etc.?
Firefighting.
No news on this.
I've got several ideas. Maybe not so much this year, but definitely have ideas for part 2 of the book, maybe the year after. But for now, I think it's just hopefully getting back in the room with teams or working online with teams to help redress the balance and increase that teamwork.
That is a skill that is much in demand at the moment. Andy, really appreciate your time.
Thank you
so much. Enjoy the rest of the Literature Festival.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.